Welcome everyone. I do want to give you just a little bit of a background on my role as well as eBay in general, just so you kind of have some context as far as what we've done with technology and why we've introduced the technology that we have. So at eBay, we actually have attorneys throughout the world in different regions, and our commercial teams are actually a little bit siloed in each region and in a few of our larger affiliates as well. So me and my team, we are basically doing mostly all of the contracts for North America. And then if there are any contracts that may involve multiple affiliates or different legal regions, then we manage those as well globally. Within our team, we have a revenue side and an expense side, or procurement side, or however you want to label the buy side of a contract. My team primarily handles all of the expense contracts. So any contract that we are buying, any technology that we're buying, any services that we're buying will come through my team. Obviously there's exceptions and bandwidth issues and things that we take over from other companies or other departments as well. But that's pretty much what we do. There's 5 of us total that manage this for North America. And just some context, and I don't know how this relates to other people, but we roughly have around, as far as contracts that are submitted from the business side that come through to us, we have probably around 3,000, 3,500 that come through a year. And then we also have, and I'll get into this in a little bit, we also have our self-service options, and we have an automation option for some of our revenue deals. So, as Lucy said, contract volume continues to grow. I think that's the case for anybody that I've talked to. I've not talked to many people that say, yeah, contracts are just dying out. We're not seeing anything. That doesn't seem to be the case with anybody that I've talked to. So about 5 years ago, prior to my joining, 5.5 years ago, prior to my joining, just as at the time of my joining eBay, there was kind of this 3-pronged approach that eBay took. The first prong was kind of the jettison of everything else that happened. So what that was really like leveraging jurisdictions. So eBay is a global company, and there are different jurisdictions or different areas that can handle the same amount of work, same type of work, different dollar values. Right? It's a cost-effective, it's a cost analysis type thing that you can do. So we opened up our Salt Lake office. It's a little bit cheaper than San Jose, Silicon Valley. A little bit more expensive than Salt Lake, you might be surprised. We also have, we opened up an office well, we didn't open an office. We reached out and used an outsourced company in India as well. At the time, and up until recently, we actually had an India office there. And so I'll come back to the benefit of that in just a few minutes. So we had this 3-pronged approach. The first prong was the jurisdictions. The second one is we had some technology already, but we weren't really leveraging it. And so we wanted to ask ourselves, how can we better leverage the technology that we already have? And then the third thing is, because of the volume of contracts that are coming through, what is the right risk approach that we should take to actually reviewing and analyzing these contracts? You know, is there a dollar threshold that if it's under that dollar value, we're okay pushing that along quicker than a more expensive contract? But what if that dollar value is fairly low, but there's still risk in that contract? What if we're developing IP, but it's just a low dollar value IP? Do we still want to have that looked at by someone who can get a better eye on it? So we basically did this mesh on a risk matrix between a contract that is at a low dollar value, or at least a dollar value threshold, but then we also have risk factors that we'll take a look at as well, and we'll kind of do some sort of an analysis at that point. So those are the 3 main prongs that we went after. Now at the time, we were just implementing a new contract management system that had rolled out, so it's been about a little over 5 years now that we had that contract management system. It worked out really well. And one of the things that we did with that contract management system, actually there's many things that we did. One is we centralized the intake process, so that no matter where you're at within the organization, no matter where you're at basically in the world, you are submitting a standardized set of submission questions so that we know exactly that contract is coming through, what's it for, how much is it for, what departments are using it. So we have a little bit more of a streamlined process that way. But then what we realized is not every contract that comes through really needs legal review. What if we templatized some of these contracts? What if instead of a business submitting a contract to an attorney, what if we pre-vetted these contracts, put them out there on our contract management system so that if you business know that you're going to be doing these contracts over and over again, I mean, low-hanging fruit is an NDA, but we also have different things with some of our coupon offerings. So for different sellers, we have certain things with statements of work that we use. If we need to use a brand's logo, these types of things where a lot of that we can templatize and use that over and over again. So that became one of the things. Now, the benefit of that process is that the business is in control. They can submit that and they can get that done very quickly. It takes the work off of the legal department's plate. So now instead of that coming through and sitting and maybe there's a big deal going on and so this is an easy one, but I'll get to that later, or I'll get to this one and now I've pushed off this major contract. That can just go through the process and just get routed for signature. This was very well received at eBay. We've been able to push through a lot of contracts now that can go through, the legal terms don't change, and they just go out, they fill them out, and the contracts just get executed for the most part. So that was one of the benefits that we had really gleaned from our contract management system. Now, up until recently, actually last July, we went live with a newer contract management, it's newer, a different contract management system. And that's been, it's been a learning event to go from something that you knew, where you knew what you didn't like and what you do like, to something new now, and finding out what do I now not like, but what do I now like. So it's you do the best you can when you're evaluating a contract management system. And just a side note, I think there's two different things. If you don't have a contract management system, sometimes it's a little bit harder, but in some regards it's a little easier to go through and implement one, because if you know what your processes are, you can try to go out and put that against the contract management system. When you do have one in place and you're trying to get different performance or trying to do things, a lot of times, and the learning here, you'll focus on, well, these weren't working, so we got to find something that fixes these, right? And then when you get it implemented, you're like, oh, but I actually liked it this way before, and now I have to do it a different way. Almost like an X, right? You go after something that you feel is missing, and it's not always better. So a contract management system. So that's the kind of the crux, or kind of the central point of everything that we're doing now. So another area we are using our contract management system for, and it's a process, and it's kind of similar to what was spoken earlier, is leveraging, we call it an expedited process. So we have our self-service, which is kind of an expedited technology process. But we also have an expedited process for those contracts that don't fit a self-service template that comes through our process through the front end. We will look at those, evaluate those, and then based off of that risk matrix I talked about, we will assign those to different attorneys. So if it comes through and it's low level, then as I mentioned, we have a small team in India that we can just push those through very quickly, and by the time they're submitted in the day, looked at and then sent out, they can be basically processed and signed by the next day. So a very quick turnaround process for that. And I'll get back to why the risk matrix and why our expedited process was kind of critical with what we're looking at now. So practically speaking then, we have those two items, and I think they've both added a lot of value. One of the other things, if you're just looking at technology in general, some of the areas that I think have been actually pretty interesting lately that we've been looking at, somewhat as a legal department, but also as a business, is if you've heard of robotic process automation. Robotic process automation, RPA as you'll hear it, or desktop process automation, is really like a macro on steroids. And so if you have a lot of information that you want to put out there, you can go from system to system, and you tie that out to go into, go from one system, a manual process, automate that, and push that through. So that's another area that I think is worth investigating. We are using it from a lot of the manual processes that we have within our system, within our contract management system. There's still a lot of cut and paste type actions that you have to take in some regards. So what that leads us to is then a fourth prong. And that fourth prong basically just popped up late last year when our VP had learned about or heard about artificial intelligence for contract review, and said, oh, our contracts team will love to look at this and be interested in this. And so we took that and we went through a lot of evaluations, LawGeex being the first one that we had reached out to, and then ended up being the last one that we actually have engaged to do some work for us. Now, one of the things that it does initially that we've utilized it for is based on the contracts that we get, primarily vendor paper, that are services agreements, license agreements, SaaS agreements, any type of a contract that can come through, we now will take that contract, run it through the AI tool, and what it will do is identify, based on a playbook that we've gone and tweaked to what is critical to eBay. What are the key things that we want to find? We don't need to necessarily have it go through every single clause. There's some risks that we're willing to take. And then let us know what is it that we need to focus on. You know, are there terms in here that we want to have it identify so that we can look at that? Or if it goes through this tool, is it okay to just accept it and it's fine the way it is? One of the things that now that we're looking at, and really a lot of the stuff that we focused on, is try to get away from the manual part of this and then focus more on the automation piece. And so right now, what we're trying to see is how can we better evolve this to work for our process. And so if a contract comes through and it's submitted, do we have to then manually look at it or manually download it and then feed it through the system, wait for the response back, and then determine from there what to do? If we do that, then it's almost just as quick for us to just do a quick manual glance. So automation is one of these key things to where if you have a set of criteria that you can use, have that contract then, when a submitter submits it, based on the criteria of the things that they are submitting, you know, the dollar value of the contract or some of the key terms as the vendor paper, some of that, have that then automatically go through and run through a process. And then based on the AI tool, depending on what it finds, if everything is a thumbs up, you know, it doesn't find any risks in that contract, and then have that contract automatically go to a team that can then process it, and it gets rid of basically any of the attorney review. If it finds any risks in it, then that's where you need to focus your information and focus your time and get that information down. And that's where we're at basically right now. It's been actually a very impressive tool as far as what we've done to date and what we're looking at doing in the future. And a lot of this, along with the other automation stuff that we're doing, is really helping to reduce the attorney time focusing on these things and being able to then free up time to focus a little bit more on some of the key things that are more important for eBay. So, thank you.